Hi guys, this is Hero. How's everyone doing today? So today I'm going over the sun's transit in the sign of Pisces, okay? Now, this transit occurs from mid-March to mid-April of 2025. Now, the sun is what? The sun is your identity, and your identity is going into the sign of detachment. Not only is it going into Pisces, which is a sign of detachment, it's got a fun little crowd there, okay? There is already Rahu there, and there is a exalted but retrograde Venus, and a debilitated but retrograde Mercury, okay? So these are three fun energies to conjoin with in this sign that I'm going to discuss. So sun, just to lay the foundation, sun is your identity, right? It goes into the sign of detachment. Now, in general, how does this play out? Well, from a spiritual standpoint, you could argue that almost any transit or anything that happens is for the best, right? Because it's teaching you something. For example, here, the sun, your identity, it's going into the sign of Pisces, which is all about detachment, being loose. So your ego, your sense of identity, everything could feel a little bit more lost and humbled and things like that, which from a spiritual standpoint is great. But a lot of you guys might not care about only that. You might care about from a material standpoint. And from a material standpoint, yes, you could feel a little bit more humbled, a little bit like every, the detachment that's been built up from the previous 11 signs, Pisces' job is to kind of strip that away and make you nice and fresh for the next cycle to start, right? And this is why Jupiter owns Pisces. Jupiter's kind of overall in charge of gauging the ending here. So you could feel like, like I said, like your sense of identity, your sense of self, your ego, it feels a little bit lost. It feels a little bit humbled, like it doesn't know what to do, possibly a little bit confused, okay? Now, it runs into Rahu first. So first, the sun runs into Rahu, like almost right at the beginning. And then a little bit later, like a week later, it runs into this Venus and Mercury at almost at about the same time. So I'll cover those two together. The Rahu, right? Rahu is what? Rahu is the illusionary planet. It blows things out of proportion, stuff like this. So how does this Rahu affect the sun, who just entered the sign of detachment? And Rahu is actually about to exit. It's getting away from the sign of detachment, and it's going into Aquarius, which it does very strongly, okay? So how is this playing out? Well, the sun, it's going into Rahu, right? So Rahu, like I said, it blows things out of proportion. So it makes you feel like you're a lot more lost than possibly you actually are, okay? Especially because it blows not only the position a planet's in, but the direction it's going. So sun is kind of going more and more into detachment. So it's kind of like making it seem like it's ballooning at like the detachment is happening way faster than usual. Okay, so you could feel a tendency, and like I said, to know what actually happens, you need to also look at your dashas and charts and things like that. But just from this one little video from the perspective of this planet, you could feel a tendency that, like you feel like less passionate about your passions, or like stuff that you normally always do, like you just kind of don't really feel like doing it. Like, and I'm not just talking about you being lazy. Like I'm talking about like you're almost like, what's the point? But it's not like a usual what's the point that crosses your mind. It's like a really deep reflection of like, why am I actually doing this if there's no point, if I don't really have to, right? Especially when it comes to things that are quote unquote like good for you, okay? So the Rahu could make you feel a lot more lost than usual. Because of that, I think that you could in general feel like you're questioning your habits and certain passions that you have. Your passions and habits that you have, you'll start to question them more, I think, okay? Now, luckily, it moves away from the Rahu sort of at the beginning of the sign, which is good. But because this also is happening at the beginning of this sign, Rahu could also trick you into developing possible new habits and passions. And it's like, hey, you know what? You feel really detached and lost, and I'm going into Aquarius. Hey, try this, right? Try this passion and habit, right? Like, you're lost anyways. What do you have to lose, right? So just watch out for that. Now, a little bit later, it starts crossing into the Venus, which is retrograde, and the Mercury, which is retrograde, right? Now, these planets, I've already discussed how they behave when they are in Pisces, okay? Now, how they're retrograde, you could watch my exalted retrograde video on just how planets act when they're retrograde. And I'm going to be making both of these planets retrograde videos independently very soon. Okay. But in general, Venus, when it's exalted but retrograde, acts a certain way. And Mercury, when it's exalted and retrograde, acts a certain way, right? Venus, when it's exalted but retrograde, it still acts really loose. Your enjoyment is really loose and things like that, but it's hyper fixated. Same thing with Mercury. Your rational intelligence is kind of lost, but you're still kind of hyper focusing on certain things, right? Now, like I said, if you want more about that information, just wait until I make the videos on those two, or you can watch my previous videos on those two planets when they went forward in Pisces, or my exalted retrograde video. And then from there, you can kind of see the whole story. Now, Sun, when it approaches these, right? So your Venus so your Sun has less of a sense of identity, right? It's kind of feeling lost, all this kind of stuff. No real sense of self, okay? Now, it approaches your Venus, who's knows how to relax but is still hyper fixated. And then your Mercury, which your rational intelligence is kind of lost, but is also hyper fixated. So what does this mean, right? Your Sun, so both of them are going to have an effect on the Sun, right? Your Sun could feel, okay, your sense of self is a little bit lost, right? And especially since Rahu's still not that far away, kind of also adding to the mix. Your sense of self is lost. So you could feel like, hey, we need to just loosen up in terms of our sense of enjoyment, which is good, right? So that way, we can feel some happiness in life. But like I said, that Venus is retrograde. So you could feel like the retrograde Venus that is possibly hyperfixating certain things, you could kind of latch on to this possibility that, hey, latching on to this specific sense of enjoyment that my Venus wants me to do could possibly fulfill that sense of purpose, especially since Rahu is also around the corner, okay? So you do need to watch out for that. That, yes, the enjoyment is good. It could be like, a great time pass or a great stress reliever, especially in this time of like confusion. But just watch out that you don't make this a part of your identity, right? You don't make gambling a part of your identity. You don't make drinking a part of your identity, especially if it wasn't before, okay? Now, how does a Mercury kind of add to the mix at the same time? So your Mercury, it kind of makes you feel like your rational intelligence is a little bit lost, okay? But it makes you kind of hyperfixate on something that you kind of need to do. So your rational intelligence is lost. So this is not a great time to, because you feel lost, don't be thinking like, oh, this is what I can do to, feel fulfilled in life or something like that, right? Don't do that, because your rational intelligence is not there. But the things that your Mercury is kind of hyperfixating on, like I said, you have a karmic kind of need to do possibly some of these things, because some of these things from the standpoint of Mercury, there's certain things that you have to do that in life that sometimes your rational intelligence gets in the way. Now, you need to be a little tricky here because this Venus is here and this Rahu's here, but there are certain things that you just have to do. But make sure that you are not doing this to kind of feel basically like you're the shit. Like don't just be like, oh, screw it, I'm gonna, this one girl I know, I'm gonna, try to get with her when I know I have no hope, right? I'm not saying, don't take risks in life or anything like that, but you just need to monitor what it is, what you're doing and why you're doing it, right? Because all of these energies have their play, right? Or have their, their influence and their purpose, which is good. But just know how this all plays together. So the Mercury and the Venus together, it could make you feel like your thought process on top of your identity. So your Sun's your identity, right? And it just could make you feel like your thought process is not really there to kind of clear the confusion. Your enjoyment is, you're able to enjoy more, which is great. But just remember, certain enjoyments, they're not going to fix that sense or that loss of purpose that you could feel. And that the things that you kind of hyper fixate on rationally, not from an enjoyment standpoint, but actually rationally, the things that just genuinely come to you and that you feel like they don't really have a crazy influence on, getting your sense of purpose back or anything like that. These are just kind of good things that you should kind of do or start. Those you can kind of consider. And, sometimes, when the slate is completely wiped clean, that's the best time sometimes to, that's when sometimes, the best ideas come. But you need to be very careful here, okay? These are a lot of very powerful, strong influences kind of coming together in a good and bad way, okay? So you need to, I don't mean good and bad in like a scary way. I just mean spiritually supportive and spiritually not supportive, conventionally not supportive ways. So you just need to be very, very cognizant. This is why I'm making so many videos on all these little things individually, right? Because each individual component matters. You miss one component, might not, work out the way you think it's going to work out, right? But just keep this in mind. No one knows everything, including me. So at the end of the day, it's like I said, this is a sign of detachment. So make sure you're doing the meditation. Make sure you're doing all this stuff. I think I said what I had to say. Okay. So if you have any questions or comments, you can feel free to let me know in the comment section or email. Until next time, I will talk to everyone later. Thank you all very, very much for watching.